coming, everyone. My name is Michelle Tassinari. I'm the Director and Legal Counsel for Secretary Galvin in the Elections Division. With me tonight is Paul Azor, who's Special Counsel for the office. And then we also have Mike Sullivan from the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, who's going to give some information regarding campaign finance after we do our write-in campaign information. So I think some of you were here for the earlier presentation where we talked to the poll workers and the election officials and gave them kind of an overview of the election day process on that side of it, as well as the counting and the standards for counting write-in votes. So this is going to cover a lot of the same stuff, but it's got a little bit of different information specifically geared towards campaigns. So one of the questions that always comes up is, can I use stickers? And as we talked about in the earlier session, you're not prohibited from using stickers. However, we do caution that your campaigns, if you're going to use stickers, invest in quality stickers. Make sure that you're using the specifications for the sticker will make sure that they fit in the ballot space, which means you could get a sample ballot from your city or town clerk, and then make sure that the sticker that you provide has the name and the address of the candidate as registered, as well as fits the size specifications so that it will be able to go in the correct space on the ballot. The other thing that's important with the stickers is making sure that if you're going to be handing them out to voters, that you're providing them with instructions on how to place them, where to place them. And that happens with the write-in part as well. The biggest job that you have as a write-in or a sticker candidate is to make sure that you're getting your voters the information they need to put the name on the ballot, whether it's using a write-in, whether it's writing the name in or using a sticker, to put it on the right ballot under the right office, because it's going to count where they put it. And so the poll workers are very limited as to the information that they can provide to the voters. So the poll workers, as we discussed in the previous session, can provide general instructions about write-ins. They can't identify who is a write-in, what office they may be running for, what party nomination they are seeking. They can't provide you with spelling of the name. So the voters are going to have to rely on the information provided by the campaigns to be able to fill out the ballot if they are intending to vote for someone whose name is not printed on them. So in providing the information to the voters, what the campaign materials should have very clear instructions as to using the name. And the other part that's important is to complete the vote indicator, especially in a municipality where they're using the optical scan ballots. So when you're using the optical scan ballots, which is what this one looks like, if the voter fills in the oval on the write-in spot, when it goes into a tabulator, it's going to go over to a separate compartment. And that way, the poll workers know exactly those ballots have write-ins on them. So they're much easier to identify. The poll workers are required to go through every single ballot that's in the main compartment to look for either a write-in or a sticker where they didn't fill in the oval. But there's a good chance that there's definitely a good chance that when they're filled in the oval itself and it's in the separate tabulator, it's much easier for them to count, and it's going to make the process at the end of the night certainly go faster so that you can have results faster. So when it comes to campaign materials, on election day, candidates and campaigns have to be 150 feet away. So if you're going to be handing out materials to voters, you're likely not going to hit them going into the polls. On election day, you have to be 150 feet away. It's with your signs, it's with your stickers, it's with any handouts. So most polling places, the voters are parking within 150 feet. So you're not going to see them when they're exiting their vehicles and going into the polling place. So the toughest job of the campaign is going to make sure that you're getting the materials and the information out before election day. And so there's different ways in which campaigns do that. Some do targeted mailings, some of them do newspaper ads, some of them do all sorts of different things to get that information out as to, again, the important things: the office you're running for, the nomination that you're looking for, which party it is, as well as your name and where to put it on the ballot. So the voters themselves will be able to bring material into the polling location, such as something that they have been provided with by a campaign ahead of time. They can use that to either peel a sticker off of it and put it onto the ballot. They can use it to write down the name of a candidate that might be on there, and they can bring that into the polling place themselves and use it for their own personal use. They can't share it inside the polling location. They can't display it inside a polling location. It is for their own personal use. And so the poll workers will go through the booths during the day and sweep those to make sure that no one has left materials inside the polling location. One of the things that always comes up for campaigns, whether it's a write-in campaign or anything else, is having observers in the polling location. So observers are allowed inside every single polling location in Massachusetts, but they need to be outside of the guardrail. So whether it's a real guardrail where there's a physical boundary, or whether it is essentially an imaginary guardrail that's just kind of a line where you tell them where they could be, observers are allowed inside the polling location. So there's two types of observers that you see inside of a polling location. One is an observer who's essentially doing poll checking. So the poll checker is someone who's, they have a copy of a voter's list that they've requested ahead of time, they bring it in with themselves, and as the names are coming in, the voters are coming in and announcing their names, and the poll workers are repeating them back, they're keeping their own marked list. And then sometimes they use that to say, oh, I think so-and-so is going to come vote for me. They haven't come out yet. They leave the polling place, make a call back to the campaign and say, hey, we haven't had these people who said they were going to come out. So that's kind of generally the poll checker. Some people will be in the polling place as an observer, and they might want to challenge voters. And the process for challenging a voter is you have to have a reasonable belief that the person is not qualified to be a voter. You can't simply say, I challenge. So the challenge process would involve the observer saying, I challenge, and they have to give a specific reason. For instance, they could give a reason that says, this person just gave the address of 1 Main Street. I live at 1 Main Street. They don't live there with me. That is a valid reason for a challenge, not just, I challenge. They have to have some reasonable belief. And then there is a challenge process that happens. If the observer does say, I challenge, and cannot give a statement as to why they are challenging, the challenge is discarded. It's not processed as a challenge. We generally will see observers for lots of elections, and if they're just doing the poll check, sometimes they don't care if they're at the check-in or the check-out. They could be at either location. The thing about the observers is that observers are there, if they're for poll checking, is to make sure that they're listening to the names as they're being read out loud as the voters come in. So when the voter comes in, their process is to provide their address and their name, and then the poll worker will find it on the voter's list, repeat it loudly and clearly, and then depending on, because it's a primary, if they're registered in a party, the poll worker also announces the name of the party before handing the voter the ballot. If the voter is unenrolled, the voter needs to announce which party ballot they would like to vote on, and then the poll worker repeats it back before handing them a ballot. If the observer cannot hear that, the only communication that an observer can have in the polling location is with the warden. They can't directly interact with either the voters or the poll workers at the check-in or the check-out. They should only address any concerns to the warden themselves. There's no engaging voters in a conversation. If an observer has to leave to make a phone call or goes outside to get something, they can't come back in and say, oh, what names did I miss on the voters list? They can't look at the voters list. They're there to observe from behind the guardrail. So when it comes to observers, if you're planning on having them, we would highly recommend that you notify your local election official in writing ahead of time. And the reason for that is because the regulations provide that if a campaign has notified them, you'll definitely have more availability in the polling location. If someone decides that they want to observe the election and they haven't notified, and you get there and there's already 3 people there who are already observing and there's no room, the person who's not going to be allowed to stay and who's going to have to work to pool their resources is the one who did not notify. So it's to your advantage to notify. It also gives the local election officials the ability to kind of set up the polling place with expectation as to who's going to be there. So it might mean an adjustment of, I need a bigger table to put the observers at. And oftentimes they'll provide you with chairs if they know you're coming. And it makes it easier for everybody as opposed to just showing up on election day. And when the observers go to the polling location, if they're going to be there, they need to check in with the warden, just so that the warden is aware of who is in the polling location and what they are there for. You can't have any buttons as an observer. You can't have any campaign material. If you're gonna bring a clipboard, make sure it's not the one you use to collect signatures on nomination papers or anything like that that might have bumper stickers on the back of it. Other things to remember about observers is you could use a laptop. An observer could have a laptop or could have an electronic device. You can't plug it in, so you can't use the electricity at the polling place, so make sure you have extra battery backup. And you shouldn't be using the Wi-Fi at a polling location. They can't give you the password to that. If you are also using any type of an electronic device, you want to make sure it's silenced. So you don't want to, if you're using an iPhone, you want to make sure that you've turned off the click, 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 click on the keyboard. And also have it on silent mode so that you're not, the phone isn't ringing or it's not dinging every time you get a message. So that's kind of the general rule for observers. So observers can also remain in the polling place after the polls close. So after the polls close, the observers could remain inside the polling location, again, from behind the guardrail, to observe the closing process. So the closing process is going to be the polls themselves close, but the polling place remains open. And from behind the guardrail, anyone who is there who wants to observe is going to see the process. And the process is going to be where the poll workers are going to take the ballots out of the ballot box. They're going to need to sort them by party. So they're going to be separated out by the Democratic ballots, the Republican ballots, the Libertarian ballots. The ones that are in the separate compartment on the tabulators, the electronic tabulators, are going to be counted separately because we know there's write-ins. But then the poll workers are going to go through every single ballot, the ones in the main compartment. They're going to go through those as well, and they're going to look for write-in votes. So the ones that are in the main compartment are going to be ones that have write-in votes on them. They could have write-in votes, but they didn't fill in the oval. Or it just wasn't read by the tabulator the right way. There may also be ballots in a separate auxiliary compartment, which is the hand count compartment. Some ballot might not have been read by the tabulator at all. Perhaps the sticker got jammed, and so the ballot had to be put into the hand count compartment. In those instances, the entire ballot is going to be counted by hand. So when you're going to produce your stickers, again, we already kind of covered where you should have the name and the address of the voter as they are registered, meet the specifications. We strongly encourage you to provide copies of those stickers or samples of the stickers to the local election officials to use during their pre-election testing. So the pre-election testing process that happens before every single election is that ballots, 50 ballots of every ballot style, are marked by hand, they're counted by hand, then they're fed into the tabulator, and the tabulator results are compared to the hand count results. If you provide the stickers ahead of time, you can get feedback as to they might be too thick, so they might be jamming the tabulator. They might be too long, so they're covering part of the ballot that makes it so it's not being able to be read. It could be that the glue on these stickers isn't really good, it's lifting up. You can see that it's gonna fall off. So you can provide that feedback, you can get that feedback ahead of time that you can then use to either adjust your stickers, decide whether you want to continue using them, to provide some valuable information to your campaign for that. The one thing you don't want to have happen is on election day, have bad stickers, have them jam the machines, and have all of the ballots have to be hand counted. I said, yes, you roll your eyes, and the election officials are all going, yes, we don't want that.
Excuse me, I should add, in Amherst, we are having a town preliminary election the same day as the state primary, so it's
that
critical.
would be twice as many ballots that have to be hand counted. All of those would also have to be hand counted.
Yeah.
So, yes.
All right, just about that. My understanding what that means, there's 2 different ballots someone gets.
So for in Amherst, because there are 2 elections happening on that day, they're separate. So the state primary ballot will be separate from the town election ballot.
And my other question was, given what you said before, does someone have to come in and know to ask for both of them, or will both of them be offered?
That will be depending on how the city, how the town structures, the way the check-in and the check-out work. They will have separate voting lists for the town election as for the state primary. It is slightly complex because of that.
We're gonna have separate check-in and check-out tables for the voting list, but there's going to be plenty of information outside the polling place for both elections. We'll try to keep that separate so that people know which information for which election.
Yeah, I just so I know that you have to ask twice, because, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be labeled very well with
Thank
signs,
you.
like state election, town election. So when you're providing information to your voters about your campaign, it is really important to provide them with as much information and as much instruction as possible for these write-ins. And that does include filling in the oval, using the name as much as possible. But the standard when it comes to counting is going to be voter intent. So if you're using a sticker, you control what's on it, you control what information the voter is going to put on there. When they're doing a write-in, you're going to have some campaigns or some voters who are going to not necessarily fill things out exactly with the name as registered and the address. However, when the ballots are counted at the end of the night, which again, it's done in public view but from behind a guardrail, so you're going to be able to see that they're being counted. You don't get to actually look at the ballots themselves. And it's a team of two. One poll worker is reading the ballot, one poll worker is recording onto a tally sheet. And if you're a known write-in candidate that has notified the clerk ahead of time, the name will be already printed on the tally sheet. So it does make it slightly easier for the poll workers to be able to record the names. When it comes to voter intent, the standard that comes from case law and in the regulations is if you can reasonably determine what the voter was intending. So if they omit a middle name or a middle initial, or omit a junior or a senior, if they omit the address, if they misspell the name, if they misspell the address, if you can figure out who the vote is for, they get that vote. So when the poll workers are going through this process, they're going to be looking at the ballots. They're going to be trying to identify based on what information the voter has provided. Again, with the stickers, it makes it easier to determine the voter intent, but then there's the downside of it could really jam the machines. So when it comes to the write-ins, again, you want to try to make sure that if you're asking voters to write in your name, you're giving them as much information as possible, which would include, this is how you should write my name in, this is where you should write my name in, and this is the party ballot you should write my name on. That information is not going to be able to be provided by the poll workers. The poll workers can only answer generic questions as to, how do I write in a name? And they would show you on a sample ballot that would be posted on the wall, they could say, you find the write-in spot for the office you want and fill in the name and then fill in the oval. But they can't direct you to, oh, I think this person is running a write-in, where should I put that? You have to, you as a campaign have to figure out how to communicate that message to your voters. The poll workers will not be able to answer specific questions like that. And so you will see a variety of, as the election results come in, you will see a variety of things. You will see that candidates who might be running for senator in general court getting votes for senator and Congress, because voters might see senator and that's where they'll put the sticker. Because the voter intent, the case law specifically says that it counts where the sticker is placed or where the name is written in. So they might be a candidate who thinks they're running for senator in general court. The voter might think they would be great as a senator in Congress. So when that is the case, it's only where the write-in is actually placed. So the other challenge that comes here for this instance, since I think the majority of the write-ins that we're expecting are for the senator and general court race, is that if someone writes in the name of a candidate in the write-in space and fills in the oval for the name of the candidate already printed on the ballot, that is considered an overvote. So no one gets a vote.
What was that again?
So if someone fills in the oval for the candidate whose name is printed on the ballot and also puts a sticker for a write-in or writes in a name, neither of them get it. Yes?
They fill in the oval for Chelsea Klein and then cross it out. Is that intent of the voter? Just try to figure out if it looks like it was crossed out?
Are they just crossing it out, or are they also putting a write-in on there?
And then also putting a write-in.
I think that one I don't think the voter intent is necessarily clear. So, I mean, and again, if a voter is unsure what they're doing, I think what they need to do is spoil their ballot and ask for a new one. So if a voter makes a mistake in marking their ballot, they can bring it back to the check-in table and they can say, I made a mistake, can I get a new ballot? So they could then get a new ballot and fill it out correctly. So we would never recommend that voters cross things out on the ballot. It's certainly much easier for everyone. They can get up to 3 ballots total. So if they do make a mistake, they're better off. And again, If they make a mistake, they can ask the poll worker, I think I made a mistake, can I get a new ballot? There are instructions that are printed on the wall that will tell you about spoiled ballots that say if you make a mistake, do not cross things out. And so that it's better for them to get the new ballot, because again, once these are being counted, you're saying it was a cross out, does it really look like a cross out? It's much harder to determine the voter intent with those types of scenarios. So it might be case specific as it comes before a poll worker when it's being counted. Yes?
I'm Brian O'Donnell, I'm one of the write-ins. I'm trying to understand, I hope this isn't too much of a digression, the virtue of instructing voters to fill in the oval at all. Because it sounds like to some degree the clerks and the election helpers are going to be looking at every ballot no matter what. Am I wrong about that?
No, they are required to look at every single ballot.
Okay.
However,
Yeah.
I mean, if there is an instance where it's going to make it much faster when they fill in the oval,
Yeah.
because you know those are there.
Mhm.
And when you're going through ballots, they're looking for things, but could they miss one? If you're looking through a large stack,
Mhm.
they could miss one. Or it could be in the wrong spot. So if they fill in the oval and you know it's in the right spot, it's much easier to figure out that there is a vote there and to look for it.
So that value of that is greater than the risk of overvotes, which, you know, if you're educating people who want to write someone in, to
I
definitely fill in
can't-
the oval. It's
I
hard to
mean,
say.
So I can't say whether one has more value than the other. I can say that the legal requirement is that they are supposed to fill in the oval, but
They
the
are supposed to.
they are. The
Oh.
regulations do require it to be counted if they don't. So
Okay.
I mean, to make sure that it counts. So in the instance I can see where this becoming an issue is
Yeah.
if there is a recount afterwards
Uh-huh.
and the ovals are not filled in, it's going to make it, there could be an argument made that it shouldn't count.
Hmm.
So that's just
Yeah.
that's just a risk, and also it does make the process more difficult at the end of the night because they're going through more ballots. The ones that are in the tabulator in the side compartment where they've been diverted because they have the write-in,
Mhm.
you know they have something on them. You know someone filled in the oval, and you can kind of audit back based on what's on the tape, how many of them are in that for each office. So it makes it easier for an accounting purpose.
Right, no, I get that it'd be easier. Okay. But as a practical matter, if someone doesn't fill in an oval, it's likely that it would be counted anyway.
It should still be
It
counted.
should in an
It
ideal
should
world.
still. In an ideal
It's just
world,
not an ideal world.
well, we have to figure that you have poll workers who have been there for 13
Right, no, of
hours and they're
course,
going to
yeah.
have multiple ballots.
Yeah.
And especially in Amherst where they're going to have not just the 3-party ballots, then they're going to have the town election ballots as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
So they're going to
that
have to
for
sort
sure.
those out as well
Yeah.
and then go through the counting process.
So,
So,
but what I think I hear you thinking is that if there's a chance of them getting it on the wrong line,
That's what I was
then
wondering.
nobody's counted it, might be better to just leave it out.
Just simpler.
I wouldn't, I mean, I can't encourage that because the regulations are what the regulations, I mean, the law says that you're supposed to fill it in. Could there be a court challenge to say you purposely didn't provide the voters with the right instructions? Could be. Someone could make the argument that you didn't even attempt to make provide the voters with clear instructions. So, I don't think that it would be good for a post-election challenge. I mean, anytime you can follow the rules, it's always encouraged. So.
Right.
So again, you'll see some places where they're gonna have, people are gonna put the write-in in a totally different spot than what you were intending to be a candidate for. And you're gonna see people who are gonna spell the names wrong. But again, it's your job as a campaign to get the information out as clearly as possible and provide that information to the voters ahead of time, because again, on election day, it's unlikely that you're gonna be able to target them. You need to get that information to them ahead of time. We've told the poll workers and the election officials that if people have questions, that as voters are coming in and they have questions, they can refer to the specimen ballots that are on the wall, because they're not gonna be able to tell a poll worker, oh, I wanna vote for so-and-so, and I want, what party are they running in? They need to know if they're an unenrolled voter who gets to pick which party ballot they want. They need to know ahead of time which party ballot they wanna write that office on, or write that candidate's name on. So they also won't be able to say, oh, I think so-and-so's running a write-in, what office are they running for? Can't give that information. It's something that needs to be conveyed ahead of time to the voters by the campaigns. So after the write-ins are all tallied, and again, we've encouraged the local election officials, if they're unclear as to what the write-in is at the polling place, write it down on the tally sheet the way it appears, and that way, when it gets back to town hall, the local election official will be able to determine whether it gets put into the bundle with other votes for a particular candidate, or whether it's something that you can't determine the voter intent on. And at each polling location, after the vote total is done, there will be an announcement. They're unofficial results. Everything that's happening on election night is going to be unofficial results. They will be read aloud, and then everything will be brought back to city or town hall. And when they're brought back to city or town hall, even though the city or town clerk might compile them as a town-wide result, it's still unofficial. There are provisional ballots that might need to be counted. There might be adjustments need to be made for when you're looking at the tally sheet to add some together to make the totals right. And those things will not happen necessarily on election night. I don't think any place will have official results on election night. We always generally recommend that you have a fresh set of eyes, look at it the next day. Make sure you did your math right. Sometimes 15 looks like 18 depending on the way who's writing it. So making sure that you have a second set of eyes who's looking at it. Unofficial results available on election night, not official results. If you want them by the precinct level, you need to have someone at the precinct listening. There's no guarantee that you get back to the clerk's office and they're going to provide precinct level results. They may not be able to do that. They may wait until the next day. So that's kind of the general overview of how the write-in process will work. Do you have any specific question? Anyone have any other additional questions on that? If there's no questions on the write-in stuff, I know Mike Sullivan would love to talk to you about campaign finance stuff. Luckily, I have to know nothing about that, so I'm going to turn it over to Michael now.
The sad truth is, prior to taking this job, which by the way was 24 years ago today, I wasn't gray when I started, is I used to be a city clerk. And I'm so glad that I don't have to do this. I feel bad for you guys. I really do.
Well, before Mike said, one thing I wanted to say.
I knew she'd do this
I
to me.
know, right?
It's all good.
So any candidate who does, whoever, if a write-in candidate does win, for a state senate seat, they need to have at least 300 votes, plus be the top vote getter. So if you have 299 votes, but you're not the top vote getter, because there is a candidate who's printed on the ballot, if they get less votes, they're gonna be the winner.
Wait a
So,
minute, do that.
You need a minimum,
Follow that.
because it's a primary, in order to be a successful nominee, you have to get at least the same number of votes that you needed signatures to qualify for the ballot. So for a state senate candidate, you need 300 signatures on nomination papers to qualify to have your name.
Right.
So your threshold in order to even think about being nominated is you have to hit 300 first. Plus you have to be the top vote getter. If you don't hit that 300 threshold, no matter how many votes you get if you're the top vote getter, if it's under 300, you cannot be nominated. So the other thing for a successful write-in campaign is they need to file a written acceptance for their office and a receipt from the State Ethics Commission showing that you filed a statement of financial interest. If you have not checked out the State Ethics Commission's website, we would strongly encourage you to do that now. The filing documents that have to go, you have to file a statement of financial interest that requires you to complete certain information. You want to figure out what documents you need to fill that out now. I don't own anything, so I fill one out, it's pretty easy for me. If you have any interest in a business, if your family owns a business, all of those things require you to provide certain information. You need to know that now. You don't want to wait until after the primary to figure out, oh, I now need to go talk to my accountant, I need to get all of this other information. So you should check out the State Ethics Commission website. You can get the filing so you can look at it as a paper filing to see what might need to be filed. You file the report with them, and then you file the receipt with us. If we don't have that, you can't go forward. Yes.
And that receipt is due when in the process?
So under the general laws as it is now, it's 13 days after the primary.
Okay.
I do expect that date will be changed to an earlier deadline, just because every year the post-primary deadlines have been shortened because we have new federal law requirements that require us to have ballots available for military and overseas ballot
Right.
voters 45 days ahead, so it usually shortens those timeframes. When it comes to the written acceptance itself, we have a generic form that we can provide to you, that can be provided to you via email.
But this year is 13 days after the primary, and you just advised,
Currently, it
okay,
will likely change,
but not for this election.
probably for this election.
Oh, got it.
Special legislation.
Oh, is that
will-
right?
Yes,
Okay.
will likely change that to a shortened timeframe.
Oh,
So, but that's why I'm suggesting, look at the state ethics filings, what the requirements are for it now.
okay.
Do you know how quick the state ethics turns around the receipt? Is it instantaneous or?
You hit, if you submit it electronically, you hit I submit it, it prints a receipt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do it too. It's
Right.
not hard, unless you,
Well,
unless you have stuff.
Unless you have stuff.
I don't have anything.
I don't have anything
I
either.
don't went to tuition. You just wait.
I know. Mine's
Um,
different for that.
So I could go into the minutia of what you need to know and everything. I'm not gonna do that. Some of you have been here a while, so what I'm gonna do is give you sort of an overview, but I want you to remember two things tonight, okay? Two things to remember. If you have a question in the process, call the office, email the office, okay? Our phone number is 617-979-8300. Our email is ocpf@cpf.state.ma.us. It's all on the website, which is ocpf.us. That's the first thing. If you have a question, call us. The second thing to remember tonight, especially where you're in a heated race out here for many offices, I understand, is don't be in the newspaper with me. Okay? Or our spokesperson. They never do stories that say what a great job you did on your campaign finance report. I know this is going on TV, I'll probably get vilified for it later, but it is what it is, right? They don't write stories that say what a good job you did, okay? I want to just draw a distinction between the elections division and our division. Sometimes people think they're interrelated. I knew that was going to happen. We're an independent agency, and so my position is appointed by both Democrats and Republicans. The secretary is the chairman of that commission, but we are wholly independent. So when you call us, it's not like we're a Democratic office or a Republican office. We're the office that just tries to get you the answer that hopefully, is the right one. And I check. We have a phone log, and I check it every day, all right, to make sure that we give out good, consistent advice. How many of you have been to our website? Okay. If you haven't used our website and you're involved in a campaign, I would tell you that that's a big mistake. You've paid for that website, and it's got a ton of data on it. What it also has in the last couple of years is help videos. So when you're doing your report or you're trying to figure out what you can and can't do, if you go to our support page and go to our help videos, they will help you. Okay, and if you still don't understand, then you can give us a call. And by the way, as those of you who are filing at the state level, the report's due August 27th. We'll be there till 8 o'clock that night. So you can call us up until 8 o'clock that night. If you're filing at the local level, you're on the same schedule because you're going to have a preliminary. So you'll file at the same time. But running locally, you file at the clerk's office. Running with the state, you file with us. If you run at the state level, we sent our emails notifying you about filing today. So some of you may have already gotten that. Our phone apparently rang off the hook this afternoon with people who just weren't used to getting that. We use R6, which is our reporting software. All right, you need to obviously have your ID number and your password. You go in and use it. It's very simple. But once you put the data in, you want to check it and make sure that you put it in correctly. Here's some common errors. Putting in the wrong date. All right, putting in 2017 instead of 2018, and then it all doesn't add up and you can't figure out why. Okay? It doesn't make sense to you. So make sure you check for things like that. Just data errors, basic, boring stuff that ends up in a newspaper story somewhere. Or you fat finger something and instead of saying $100, you put in $1,000 for somebody. Data entry. So whoever you have to do your treasurer stuff, make sure you trust them, okay? So if you're running, not to denigrate at the local level, but less money's raised there, if you're running at the state level, please don't have your ex-brother-in-law twice removed be your treasurer, just because it sounded like a good idea at the time. Get somebody you trust that can handle a checkbook, okay? That's really very important because it will save a lot of problems down the road. What I want to explain is what we call the blackout period. This is important in terms of the media. Under our statute, there are different ways we can close a case, but the biggest thing we can do is refer something to the Attorney General's office, but we can't do that within 120 days of an election, okay? So as of August 1st, we create what we call the blackout period, which means if you're on the ballot and there's a complaint filed against you, even if we resolve it, we don't publicize it, okay? In other words, you folks are going to fight this out amongst yourselves, and we're not going to be a political football. The legislature made it clear that they didn't want us to be involved in that. One of the points I wanted to make is when we leave here, I will stick around for a few minutes. I do what's called the confessional. In other words, if you don't want to ask a question in front of everybody else here, all right, we come out here, I do one of these jobs, and we all talk about it for a little bit, because you might not want to ask because you don't know everybody in the room. So I don't want to embarrass anybody with that. This is a trifold that Jason gave me. I've got some here. They were for local candidates, apparently, that they were put out for me. Jason, by the way, our media person is a guy named Jason Tate. He normally does these seminars. After 24 years, I get a breakout on them sometimes. But tonight he had tickets to take his kid to the Patriots game, his 3 kids. So I'm a football official. I can feel for that. So he went. And I sat home and didn't go to the Patriots game. Came out here.
Thank you.
More than that, I like coming out here, actually. If you have public employees working on your campaign, be careful with them. Keep them away from the money. Obviously, they can't be a treasurer. They can't sell tickets. They can't be sitting at the door of the fundraiser. The most common thing that we get for a complaint is so-and-so has a public employee working on their campaign, and they were sitting at the front door taking in the money. And by the way, here's a picture of them, since everybody can take a picture with their phone now. That story, if you've had teenage children, I'm going to guess that you read the police blotter, okay, right, to see if your kid is on there or your kid's friends, all right, you read it all the way through. You're not going to read a story about dark money or about PAC limits. That's kind of boring, I get that. But the public employee story, that's the one everybody reads all the way through. So please be careful with public employees who are working on your campaign. They can help you, they just need to stay away from the money. They can't solicit, they can't receive, they can't do it directly, they can't do it indirectly. That's a 45-minute seminar I just did in 2 minutes. Okay?
And they can't send emails from their
And
governmental
well,
email.
I was going to get to the public resources part, but I'll get to it in just 1 second. Okay. Yes, they can't send fundraising emails from their public email address. And when you're going for money, soliciting money, your campaign is, scrub your email list so that you're not sending it into a public email address, which is technically received at a public building, because you can't fundraise in a public building. Can you fundraise in a public park? Yes, provided the city or the town doesn't have a ban against it, some kind of an ordinance or a bylaw that says you can't do that. But once you use it, a park, everybody can use it under the same terms and conditions. So public buildings, public employees, and public resources, which is something the town paid for, you can't use it in your campaign. That sounds pretty basic, right? But I'll tell you, we don't see it as much in candidate issues as much as we see it in ballot question issues, okay? Something comes home in the backpack, little Johnny brings something home in the backpack that says, our children are our future, please vote yes on the override. There was a question back there?
My husband gets, was it $100 a year from the city? Is he a public employee? Because he's been telling me he can't help him in my campaign.
What do you think? Wow, cause of divorce, Mike Sullivan. What do you do?
I'm registrar of voters.
You're on the registry.
It really
You
doesn't.
might have a policy in there. So, okay, here's the deal. The answer is yes, you're a public employee.
I thought so.
The only niche that we pulled out was for poll workers. They are public employees on the day they are a poll worker,
Right.
otherwise they're not. Because back, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was a woman in Rockport who was the treasurer of the Democratic Town Committee and dearly didn't want to give it up. She said, I work 2 days a year, I make $160. I thought, okay, we can create a niche for that. But you're on the board of registrars, that's a little different. They meet quite
I
often.
said no.
So does that mean only on election day he can't work?
No.
Or just no time at all?
He can help you, he can, you know, write support cards, he can do your white papers, whatever you want, but he's gotta stay away from the money.
Oh, okay, fine.
Great, my car will probably have its tires slashed right now. So that's public employees and public buildings and public resources. You know, the basic rules, we all know the $1,000 limit, You gotta itemize over $50. You need occupation and employer at $200 or more, not just 200 at one point, 200 in the aggregate. Reimbursement checks, this is,
Occupation for retirees?
that's your occupation, retiree. Isn't that wonderful? I'm hoping to be there soon. Reimbursements are a real issue in campaigns, and they're a real red flag to us, okay? We would love you to minimize, when you're running for the legislature at the local level, to minimize reimbursements. But we actually have a statute that says you cannot write a reimbursement check to yourself. In other words, you can't say, pay to the order of Mike Sullivan, signed by Mike Sullivan, endorsed by Mike Sullivan. What that means is we would encourage you to have 2 names on the checking account that have signing authority, okay? Because if you want to pay your treasurer, that person can't write a check to themselves. And the reason we have that law is because of Diane Wilkerson, who many of you probably recognize that name, as former state senator, and a guy named John Bonomo, who was reimbursing himself for postage, and then turned around and doctored his bank records. What he didn't understand when we asked him for his bank records is that we already had them. We had subpoenaed them. So when he gave us his bank records, and they weren't the same as the bank records from the bank, that was misleading an investigator, and he spent 2.5 years in the Bill Ricker House of Correction. So that changed the reimbursement rules. So you need to be careful with that. They're a fact of life, they happen. We encourage you to use the debit card, because that's going to give us good documentation when we need it. What's the one thing you can't do with a debit card?
Get out cash.
Get out cash. You had a question?
So, candidate buys a whole bunch of stuff using her own money, has receipts and everything, looks for reimbursement. It's not wrong, it's just
It's not
discouraged.
wrong. It's not, we prefer that they not, I'm not a big fan of reimbursements. But it's not wrong. You can do it. You can legally do that.
Is a loan better?
So here's what we would tell people when that happens, especially because it's usually candidates, right?
Yeah.
For the most part in these types of races. Write a check to the campaign and do everything out of the campaign account. Call it a loan, and then at the end pay yourself back if there's money left.
The hard part is when there aren't funds and you can't, so put the money into the campaign
You
account
got it.
first.
You got it, yeah.
And then for things like mileage or volunteer bought donuts, gave a receipt, that's less problematic, I would assume.
No, it's less problem. It's fine. I mean, that's what we do. You pay people for their mileage. In terms of mileage, there's something called an in-kind contribution, which is something your campaign receives that's of value, but it's other than money. Okay, someone offers to buy an ad for you, or they offer to pay for stamps for you. That's in kind. It's not a monetary contribution, but it counts towards the $1,000 limit. But there are 2 exceptions to that. One is ordinary hospitality. So when you're doing these neighborhood parties and you show up at someone's house and they have, beer and wine and cheese pizza or whatever, that's ordinary hospitality. You don't have to count that as a contribution or expenditure. The candidate could pay for it. It's a legitimate expenditure, but it's ordinary hospitality. How do you know when it's not ordinary hospitality? The truth is, it's sort of like pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Okay? So if you had a pig roast at a valet, that's not ordinary hospitality. So that's one exception to in-kind. And the second one is personal services. Is your treasurer being paid? Probably not. Well, they're worth something, right? But it's a personal service that they're providing for you. So that's an exception to the in-kind contribution rule. People who hold signs for you, they're worth something, right? That they're making a contribution in your mind to you. But legally, how would you value that? The person who's 6'4" is worth more than the person who's 5'7" because they're taller? So that's a difficult thing. That's why they have the exception. Other basic things, no raffles, okay? If you want to have a raffle, you're supposed to get a raffle permit. Where do you get that raffle permit? At the clerk's office. And who do they give it to? Not political committees, because they're not authorized. So don't have raffles, because that's another complaint that we get all the time. Do not leave a fishbowl on the front of on the front table as people are coming in. And people are just stuffing 20s in it. You need to know where every dollar is coming from. Why do you need to know that? Because the statute requires it. But let's be honest, I want to know who's giving me money so I can thank them, ask them to come again, put a sign up on their property. I want to know everybody that's there. Okay, so and anonymous contributions, quite frankly, have to be purged. So I grew up in Lynn, so I have kind of a whoop sense of how things work electorally. I know you'd like that, Paul. I don't live there anymore, I moved out. I want to go back, my wife won't go. That's another story for another day. If you went out to pick up your paper in the morning, back then when you just picked the paper up and there was $200 in cash in an envelope there, saying you're doing a great job, keep it up, you were being set up, right? Okay, and they wouldn't tell you what it was. So what we tell you is if you have anonymous money, you need to put it into the bank, and then you need to report it as anonymous, and then purge it by writing a check to your favorite charity. That way, anonymous money is not remaining in your campaign account. Cash is limited to $50. Money orders are limited to $100. As of right now, there's no corporate contributions allowed. Okay, there's a court case pending that might change that, but right now, corporations can't give. Corporations mean basic corporations, LLCs, limited partnerships, limited liability companies. The only business that can give is a sole proprietorship. So if you get a business check, call that person, or whoever is sending it to you, call them before you deposit it. And if it's a corporate check, say to them, thanks, but I really can't take it. Any chance you can write me a personal check instead. Okay? Quickly, expenditures. The language for making expenditures. Expenditures can be made to enhance the political future of the candidate or to enhance the purpose for which a committee was organized. Okay? That sounds pretty basic, right? Let me give you a couple of examples. Everybody knows that you can spend money for printing and postage, right? Ads, all that good stuff. And everybody knows that you can't go to Disney World, right? Or pay the mortgage. There's a big debate right now in the legislature as to whether or not you can pay for daycare, but that's another issue for another day. Let me give you this one. After a hard day of campaigning, everyone's back at campaign headquarters and I buy 10 pizzas. Can I pay for that out of my campaign account? Yes? I can, okay. But Michelle is a valued political consultant, and I really want her to work on my campaign. So I take her to dinner, and we go to Ruth Chris's. We have a really good dinner, a couple bottles of wine. The bill's about $250. Can I pay for that out of my campaign account? How many say yes? Oh, there goes my pen. How many say no? How many don't care? So the answer is, legally, yes. Because it will enhance my political future to get Michelle as my political consultant. What you need to think about sometimes when this happens is legality versus reality. The reality is the response I get from some of you, right? They're not going to like that. But legally, we're going to tell you it's okay. You need to think about those things when you're spending money, about how you want to game plan what you're doing.
I have a question.
Yep.
What about incentivizing things for volunteers? Not with cash, but with,
Sounds like something out of data analytics.
so get photos of the candidate, I don't know, just
Give me an example.
make 100 phone calls this weekend and get, I don't know, what, a photograph with the candidate,
No money involved, sounds good to me.
Fine, right?
Yep.
Well, you gotta print the photo.
How about a lollipop?
I think lollipops are okay.
That's
So-
a different question. You have these $50 cash limit, $100 for a money order. What if you do something through an online thing like PayPal?
So we have a memo on our website that talks about credit cards and how to do it. And there's certain things that you have to follow. But basically, you have to get all the information that you, from the credit card company or from the third-party vendor
Yeah.
that you would get from the individual, which means you generally have to have a website that's pretty well developed to do that. What is important is if you get money, if you're using ActBlue or any of those groups, when you report the contribution, I put in that I'm going to give you $1,000 via credit card. You get a check from ActBlue for how much?
Less.
Some of you know, it's like $948.17 or something, right? But what you report is $1,000 from Mike Sullivan and an expenditure to ActBlue for the processing fee, because you need to make the numbers balance. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. And you're not going to report a contribution of $948 because that's really not the intent of the contributor. Okay, it's no different than, getting a check for $1,000 and spending $500 of it on an ad. You would report both of those. I can see your brain going.
So the contributor, I hadn't thought about this, but ActBlue asks for a tip to pay for the service fee. Can the contributor pay $1,000 plus that tip? No.
It's all one deal. So there's a lot of, and this stuff is going to come up as you go. I know there's 4 weeks left. It's crunch time for the primary. You got to call, right? There are people in the office. This is what we get paid to do. And you can talk to anybody in the office. You can also get any answer you want in writing, okay? And we like to do that, and we try to do that within 24 hours. We like to do that because that means we fully understand your question. Sometimes people talk by each other, and that's not good, okay? Because we're hearing one thing, and you're hearing another. So if there's any confusion at all, we ask you to send it to us in an email, and we generally can turn it around that day.
I haven't received a contribution from PayPal yet.
Yes,
So
you
I have. I have?
one.
Okay. Did it
You
give
don't know about it?
information? No, he doesn't. He's not my treasurer. She is.
Good answer.
But does PayPal, I don't use PayPal, but does it
It takes
give you the
out-
record? Do they tell you who it is and their
You
address?
should be getting it,
They
you should be
do,
getting a
actually.
communication. Yes, that's the only way you're gonna know where the money's
But
coming
I don't
from.
know about the address, I mean, I only happen to know the address of the person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not big, we're not big fans of PayPal.
Yeah,
Let me just put it that way.
I've been having problems with PayPal's
Yeah,
payment, but
yeah.
it is voluntary as
Yeah.
far as I can tell. So
I'm not-
there's a default.
I'm not a big fan of PayPal. Can I just leave it at that?
Act Blue is
Yeah,
one of
you-
them.
if you wanna call us and we'll walk you through with using the memo and all of that, that would be probably the best bet for you. Act Blue, we work with pretty closely. They're based out of Somerville, they're nationwide, they know what they're doing. PayPal, they really don't care.
Say that again, please. You say at Blue?
Act Blue, yeah. Yeah, I'm not endorsing them, I'm just saying that that's a vast majority of people use them.
Can I ask what
Sure.
part you walk through with the PayPal part? 'Cause
Just
that's
making sure we're all on the same page about what to do. And we have a memo on our website
About PayPal.
about credit cards in general, and it mentions PayPal.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I've called your office, I don't know, 50 times, and it's every single time the person who answers the phone is able to answer my question. I don't know, I'm blown away by that.
I don't know if we're good or your questions are simple.
I don't know if they're simple, I didn't know the answer when I called.
I do hope that we answer within 3 rings, because we look at it as if, and I've been doing it a long time, like I said, we try to look at it as if we're a private business without a profit motive, and you're our customers. And that's what we try to make sure that, we get the phone quickly and we answer the questions, so that's good to hear. So,
Your name
that's
was
good.
advising you.
I validate that too.
Thank
Remember,
you.
I've called, it doesn't take very many rings, and if the person doesn't know, they find somebody who does and get back to me.
Yeah, that's the goal. The goal is to have happy customers. Not so much that we want return calls, but we want happy customers. Any other questions? So that's basically it. I know you've all been here a long time, and I don't want to keep you any longer, but
So just to return to in-kind category of contribution. In the town campaign, we might find that 95% of the funding that we have to track is in-kind. So that's fine, but if you could
I won't take
describe,
this personally, ladies. Go right ahead.
I will. If you can characterize in-kind that needs to be tracked versus what doesn't need to be tracked, any more description or
Well,
direct.
as I said, it's anything of value other than money that you receive. And the 2 exceptions are ordinary hospitality,
Yeah.
okay, which is, someone's hosting a little party for you, or a personal service. And what you will see is the treasurer someone holding signs, people writing out cards for you. Those things don't count. The one thing I would caution
So
you.
by those things being, people spend some time, but we
Yeah.
don't need to itemize.
You don't need to itemize
6
it.
hours
That's-
at some pay rate.
That's
Forget
nothing.
that. Forget that.
That's a nothing.
If I drive my candidate, I'm a treasurer, if I drive my candidate 300 miles to go do something to do the campaign, should I be noting that mileage, for example?
300 miles might go beyond the personal service,
We
because
might
then
be
you're like
lost.
an Uber. But at 3 miles, no.
Okay.
That's basic.
So-
Let me just make this one point about in-kinds. Everybody seems to know somebody who owns a restaurant or a bar, okay? And oftentimes they have a side room that they rent out for $250, okay? And what they say to you is, oh, don't worry about it, it's on me, you're my friend.
Sure.
No.
Mhm.
Okay, that's a corporate contribution. You have to pay the going rate. Now, I know you've all been to Bertucci's except for the fact that it closed. I'm a little disappointed in that when I drove up today, because it's like, where we go? Bertucci's has a side room. They give it to everybody for free. If that's their normal business practice, that's fine. But if they're giving you a deal, then you're probably gonna have a problem. And we had actually 3 or 4 cases of this out in Pittsfield a couple of years ago. And it's been something that's percolated. The Globe did a big story on it a few years ago about up in Lawrence, where the then mayor of Lawrence was holding fundraisers in all of these restaurants. And we were like, oh my God, he doesn't show any expenditures. And then we found out that the Dominican way is that they give you the room and they make the money on the drinks. And they weren't charging anybody, so it was okay. And
Yeah.
that was not well received by the media at that point.
Are you saying that you just plain can't use the room because
They
it's a
can pay for it.
corporate contribution, or you can list it as an in-kind
No,
thing?
you can't use the room unless you
do it.
pay for it. Your campaign can
Unless
pay
you
for it. Just like
Okay.
anybody, you know, if my daughter
Unless
wanted
it
to
was
have
a
a
sole
baby shower there.
proprietorship. Unless it was a sole proprietor.
If it's a sole proprietor, right, but most restaurants are not. But we run into that an awful lot, that question we get hit with a lot. Any questions?
Back to your 300 miles.
Is a teacher or university professor a public employee?
If you are a university professor, and I'm trying to be a wise guy here, but if you are a university professor at Amherst College, no. But if you are a university professor at UMass, yes. And a teacher, same idea. If you're a teacher at Phillips Andover Academy, no. But if you are at Amherst High School, yes.
You're a retiree from the university?
A retiree is a retiree no matter what. They're not public employees.
They're just an
They're not public employees.
Back to your 300 miles. So I'm driving 300 miles, but I'm not charging her, but I should count that as in kind?
If you're going one way, 300 miles, I would say, yeah, that's an in-kind contribution. But I don't know any districts that are 300 miles long in this state, so I'm not sure. I mean, if you do a bunch of little
Go
trips.
ask you a question.
I'm sorry?
We have to go ask you a question.
Yeah, there you go, call us up. Call us up, my staff will come down and go, Mike, some lady's on the phone asking about a 300-mile trip. I'll be like, yeah, I know where it's from.
So if a candidate works for a public institution, and the candidate spends some money on their own campaign, is that okay?
Absolutely.
Fine.
Yeah. If you're a public employee and you're running a campaign and you are raising any money but your own, you need to organize a committee because the committee will do it on your behalf.
Right.
If you're not raising any money but your own, you don't need to organize that committee, but you do need to show that you're putting the money in. And by the way, at the local level, what we see most often when we do our audits, and you know, Carol comes up and does audits, is that you'll see receipts, 0, expenditures, $1,200, ending balance, minus $1,200. Well, you can't have minus $1,200. The money came from somewhere, and it's the candidate doesn't think of themselves as a contributor to their own campaign. They need to put in that they raised their own, that they spent their own money. It's kind of we kind of didn't do this in order tonight, but that's okay.
A lot of
You're
retirees.
getting in enough trouble. You really want to ask another question?
I haven't asked any.
Yes, I asked about you.
There are a lot of retirees who have emails that say something edu. Is that a problem?
I would suggest it is, yeah. I would strongly urge those retirees to get a Gmail address, or even a Yahoo or an AOL.com, I don't care, just those .edus. Now, Harvard.edu, Amherst.edu is fine. UMass Amherst.edu is a problem, or UMass.edu. Yeah. And it's an easy story for people to understand. And it reared its head back when a guy, I forget his name, but he challenged Mayor Menino. So it was a while ago. And the Globe ran that story for 3 straight days. He sent out 2,500 emails, and 45 of them were to public employees. Because it's a story people understand. It's got a little bit of juice to it. It's like the public employee story. So we tell people, avoid, you know, make sure you scrub your email lists, your fundraising lists, and avoid the public employee addresses.
Give us a little more of a sense of what an email looks like that's a campaign email that doesn't ask for money. Because that's the trick. So I used to tell everybody, just scrub the bloody email list and just don't send anything to those. And they're like, well, they told us we could send it as long as it doesn't ask for money.
there's
So what does that mean?
Well, there's an email, I mean, you can do an email that says, you know, so-and-so supports such and such. And that's pretty much it. Or make sure that you get to the polls and vote to get out the vote email. But honestly, the truth is, most emails, yeah, they're asking for money.
If they're telling you to go to their website, they're basically asking for money. It's a pretty fine line.
This is why I'm glad I'm not involved in elections or campaigns. This is kind of like a little safe harbor for a while. Confessional's open when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you.